Hi, it's Kesha. I'm back. If you all haven't figured out by now, you know this is really just a space for me to share ideas from spirit. Um, so all of the little tips and techniques and things that I've learned on my journey to developing and revealing more of my potential, I share them with you gladly and happily. And then today I had an idea to share with you something that's a little bit more fun. Not quite so serious, but does have a serious backstory. So, as you might see from the title of this video, it will be how I talk to my plants. And, first and foremost, I talk to my plants with love. I talk to my plants. Maybe that's the first thing to say. Because I know they are sentient and they feel and they are alive, right? And the ones that live choose to be in my environment, and those that don't. So I just kind of take that as it is, and I work with it. I have to tell you, so back when I used to go to work and come home from work, that sort of thing. Of course, I'm working from home now that it's pandemic. But I would come home from work, and the first thing I'd do is take off my shoes, probably change my clothes, and go walk around and talk to my plants and visit with them. And one day I thought it was funny that I did that, and I noticed that it was a habit. And I was wondering, what does that come from? What is that? And instantly I popped into my mind the image of my mom. She'd come home from work, she'd take off her shoes, she'd change her clothes and go talk to the plants. And obviously I picked that up. So yay, it's kind of the cool thing. And, when I was going through seminary, of course, our homework would be to actively employ to experience some of the things that we were reading about. So when Jesus stills the raging seas, our homework was to control the weather, right? Because that's what this metaphysical Christianity is that I believe. It is that which is behind the physical, the metaphysical, and Christianity. It is practicing the teachings of Christ as he taught them, and to make real the promise, these things I do, you shall do, and greater. So if Jesus can heal the sick, and if he can still the waves, then that is within my ability too. Because Jesus is not, as it's written in the King James, the only begotten Son. He's simply the first, right? And he's not even really the first, because there were others who held the office of the Christ before him, but that's into another lesson entirely. Anyway, going through seminary, our homework was always to do something that we had read and seen him do. And so that was just kind of the thing. And then at one point, I was talking to my plants, and I think it was a desert rose that I had, and then something else that wasn't thriving. And we had already just covered the useless cumberer speech that he gave the fig tree that Monday of Holy Week, when they were going into, I think it was Bethany. Anyway, I just read that, and I'm looking at my desert rose, and it's a desert rose. It is supposed to bloom, and mine had not bloomed in a really long time. And so I'm like, this is not right. You have the capacity. This is what is in your nature to do, and you are not doing it, despite me having given all of the appropriate resources: water, air, sun, all of that, fertilizer, soil. I'd given it all the resources that I thought it required in the way that I thought it could use them. And still it had a beautiful, rich, thick stalk. The leaves were big and glossy, vibrant green, but still no blooms. So one day, and there was another plant too, like I said, they were sitting there together. I was like, look, I gave the plant the useless cumberer speech. And I'm like, look, you have within you all the ability to do this thing, which is to bloom, and you're not doing it. So if you're not going to do it, I'm going to need you to go ahead and die so I can get rid of you, and I will replace you with someone or with something who can actually express its potential. And for those of you who don't know the useless cumberer speech more formally, I'm just going to read the two little sections from the Aquarian that it comes from. And I like to read it from the Aquarian Gospel. I'm sure it's in the King James, but when I went through seminary, I did not read the King James. I read the Holy Bible, the Lamsa translation, but my favorite telling of the story is from the Aquarian. So this is chapter 152. Jesus rebukes the barren fig tree, drives the merchants out of the temple, teaches the people, returns to Bethany. And so verse 1, it starts. Next day, the Monday of the week, the master with the 12 went to Jerusalem. And as they passed along the way, they saw a fig tree full of leaves without a sign of fruit. And Jesus spoke unto the tree. He said, "You useless cumberer of the ground, you fig tree fair to look upon, but a delusive thing. You take from the earth the air and the food that fruitful trees should have. Go back to earth and be yourself the food for other trees to eat." When Jesus had thus spoken to the tree, he went his way. So, that delusive thing, it's something that is deceptive. The tree is deluding you and deceiving you and disappointing you by thinking that it's going to be a fig tree with all these luscious leaves, when in fact it's not bearing fruit. And so he's telling the tree, if you are not going to produce the fruit which is within your birthright, then you go back into the earth and be a resource and food for others, right? And so the second part of that is, the next chapter. The Christines go to Jerusalem. They note the withered fig tree. It's symbolic meaning. Jesus teaches in the temple, is censured by the priests, relates the parable of a rich man's feast. And so verse 1 starts. On Tuesday, early in the day, the master and the 12 went to Jerusalem. And as they went, the 12 observed the tree to which the Lord had talked the day before. And lo, the leaves were withered, just as if they had been scorched with fire. And Peter said, "Lord, see the tree? Its leaves are withered, and the tree seems dead." And Jesus said, "So shall it be with those who bear no fruit. When God shall call them to give account, lo, he will breathe upon them, and their leaves, their empty words, will wither and decay. God will not let the fruitless ones of life encumber ground, and he will pluck them up and cast them all away." Now, you can demonstrate the power of God. Have faith in God, and you can bid the mountains to depart, and they will crumble at your feet. Okay, so that's the little parable of the useless cumberer. And so, what I told the desert rose. Look, if you were not going to bloom, then go ahead and die so I can replace you with something that will. And lo and behold, I think it was about a week later, a little bud started. And that bud became 3 or 4 as they cluster the way that they do. And my desert rose bloomed. And so I kind of laughed because, of course I'd been through seminary and I'd had several experiences where I had commanded the weather, where I had, healed the sick and done these things just as Jesus did, because he said, "These things I do, you shall do in greater." But the tree, the fig, just me playing around with the energy, not to play necessarily, but just to experience it, not with something so serious as a life and death matter, or necessarily trying to move mountains and obstacles, but just want to get my plants to do better, to bloom and to be beautiful. And it worked in just the same way. So that was a few years ago. And of course, I still talk to my plants. I talk to them, maybe not every day, because I don't have the, going to work and coming home to really regulate my schedule. And so, I go out, I have lots of plants on the balcony, and I've got, cocoa here in the Z plant in my office. And I've got another Z plant in the bedroom. And I think, and I've got a little, an arrowhead that I've been working with for a while. And actually I talk to it every day, of course, and I also give it energy, and I can show you that in a little bit. But yeah, I talk to my plants on the regular, maybe just not every day, but on the regular for sure. They know who I am. And now it's gotten to the point I don't actually have to give the speech. It is enough. I have seen this happen with enough of my plants that I can say, "Hey, if you're not going to do right, I'm going to give you the speech." And so I swear, my plants know me. I have actually seen them shake And like, all right, she's coming for us. I better do or get out. And invariably they do. I think I've only lost one, and I can't even feel bad about it because, you know, it had choice, and that's what it chose. So it chose to go be food for someone else or something else. So yeah, I don't actually have to give them the speech anymore because I was so firm the first time. I have set that bar in consciousness, and now the rest of them know, to the point where all I have to say is, hey, hey, you're going to get the speech if you don't start to produce. And they like, all right, Kesha, we get it. And they start to do. And so it's not like I'm threatening them, but I'm just, you know, reminding them of the different options. So yeah, that's how I talk to my plants. I talk to them in love, but you know, if they're not going to do right, then we'll have that conversation too. And we're not afraid. Speaking of which, the resources we have and the blooms that we make, this has come up a couple of times in the last week, or last couple of weeks. So I want to just bring it to your attention too, because maybe it's happening for everyone. And that is, let's not be fed by our results. When, you know, the desert rose isn't fed by its bloom, right? It's fed by the sun. It's fed by water. It's fed by air. It's fed by light. It's fed by fertilizer and soil. The bloom is just the byproduct of all of those things having come together and worked their way out into the physical as this point of beauty. So when we are tempted to look at our life and the things that we are experiencing, of course, it's great to see rewards and to see all the cool things that we can buy because of all these things. But remember, the real activity, the real work is in feeding yourself of spirit, whether that is getting enough sleep, whether that is eating food that nourishes you, whether that is having loving, sustaining relationships that bring you joy, or being a contributor to your community. All of those things are what feed you, and the accolade, the rewards, the acknowledgement, that is all simply the byproduct. So let's not be fed by our blooms, as it were. So I mentioned that I would tell you how my arrowhead, it's an interesting spot where, you know, there's light in the room, but not light on it. And, you know, they need some sort of light in order to function. I mean, it's a low light plant, but even in that space, it's a little bit too low. But I've determined to overcome that. And one of the things that I do is every time I walk by it, I acknowledge it. I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I don't want to stand up, but so I will put my hands out and I will send energy, love and light of myself into my plant. And for any of you that, I mean, I'm not just holding out my hands here, I'm physically sending energy. And I don't know a way of showing you how I do that other than telling you that I'm energizing my hands, and there's actually there's this flow, there's this heat, there's this radiance that comes off of them, and I'm directing it at the plant that it grows. And radiance is a really good word for it because it's, you know, it's not necessarily like, you know, our auras have brightness about us. It's like I'm energizing my aura and sending the energy down into my hands, and I'm directing it at this plant. So it's getting its own personal boost of sunlight, but given from me. And so I do that every time I walk by, and I'll just, just give it just a couple of seconds, a couple times a day, however many times I think about it, if just acknowledging it isn't enough. So that's something else you can do. I know those of you who know Reiki, you give your plants Reiki, and you've probably seen some videos where they've given, like they'll be filming at the bazaar, and you'll see fruits that have been fed Reiki and those who haven't. And of course, those that have been given Reiki are bigger, more lush, more vibrant, bigger and better. But it's the same thing, just saying an energy. Doesn't necessarily have to be Reiki. It's just that moment of intention and giving of yourself, sharing of yourself with that plant. So that, my friends, is how I talk to my plants. Speaking of, if there's ever a book you wanted to read about this very thing, the sentience of plants, I think it's The Secret Life of Plants by Peter Tompkins. I know I have it. It is right here. It is. And this is why I love my books. To be able to just call one up and to reach over and there it is. I'm so happy with this. The Secret Life of Plants. This is one of the coolest books, I'm telling you. Not only does he talk about plants and how they're able, like they did an experiment where they measured its sentience in terms of like I guess they hooked it up to an EKG, and when they brought scissors near the plants like were shaking. And he writes in such a visual style that when you are reading it, you can actually see it. I think he tells a story too, or maybe it was like he tells a story about somebody doing this experiment on Johnny Carson's show, and maybe you can even find that clip, but it's very similar where, they can feel the scissors coming, and so they start to freak out. And so if they're going to freak out over potentially being cut, then of course they're going to be loving you if you love them. So we do that. It also talks about experiments they did with playing classical music for the plants, and they seem to thrive on that. But then when they were playing some sort of like death thrash metal, the plants were angry and wilted and shriveled, and what you would expect. Not too different really from the water experiments on snow, with Masaharu Emoto, and the difference of snowflakes that you see when you put the word love on a bottle of water versus, putting a label on it like hate. You can see the difference in how they manifest. Another really, really fantastic chapter, and I highly recommend that if you're only going to read for just that. The story of George Washington Carver is mentioned in here, and it's such a beautiful story. And what I love about that is that, everybody came to him when he was, of course he did so many experiments with peanuts. And so many people suggested to him that, there's so many ways you can make money for this. And he's like, these ideas came from spirit. They are for me to give back with love. And so it's not for me to profit off of. But it's a really fantastic book. And I can't say enough about it. And I'm glad that I have. I'm glad that I read it. And I'm happy to have shared it with you. So there we are. It's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun. We'll do it again. We'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, hey, and for those of you who get this link because I'm so gracious as to text it to you, you might want to consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, because I have 14 subscribers now. I might not have time to send so many texts.